A story with debris and froth pulling from the banks as it comes, never the same twice, step in and be renewed. If glass-bottom boats and red-dotted fishes. If another line just under the surface, if you can't see without drowning, if sometimes in storm, sometimes becalmed. If each person carries her own boat, dam, leaf, cutting its own way through or swept along and over the cliff, story is waterfall and prismed light, story is gravity. To betray yourself as evidence, shoving ahead in the dark. Her brother's blonde head rising above waves, a man on the bed telling stories. Little girls in exquisite ice, beaded swans, a soldier inside a hollow tree. 3 sets of enormous eyes. And when the story bolts out of the tree, an old woman is mound in X's on doors. Incongruous. The man with one glimpse, wishing her forever. He smelled like salvage. Damp books that hadn't been opened in years. Dust along the corners.
Father in the attic speaks snail. I am a man who reads books, seated in a palsy chair, trying my best not to fall. I always imagine the worst. My wife entertains the garden snails that slide in on her studio wall. Books are chapels with cryptic hours, accordions snapped shut, instruments of skin and gut. They wait for me in rows, door-to-door, multicolored domiciles, leather-winged bats, folded closed, dry and dear. I'll say it. I'm not much more than here. I hear her in the cellar now, wrestling her angled forms, and on the second floor, my daughter examines the mirror. Snails, I tell you, will be everywhere. Books wait with the patience of things that recall their previous lives. Pages of paper were trees. Linen was flax in the field, ink a stone's mineral, a wasp's gall. This afternoon it rained. I hear the sticky approach. Brilliantined pompadours, sarcastic edges curl, swivel eyes on swizzle sticks, too soon in parks and in bars. They'll slime on my girl. Books are honey frames, stacked sideways in the hive, mattresses on end, waiting for their sleeper to return. Oh, I can read intentions on their racy shells. My shoes know where to go. We'll meet in the garden tonight to see if I am still a man who competes with snails.
She and her brother dig tunnels in the dirt, pushes metal figured men into holes and follow them with their fingers. Lay their stories out like weed stems and seed heads, stacked into halls and beds and forests. Girls she had to search for, never staying for tea, bareback on a reindeer or cutting a carcass in the snow. To fight north and win through, resist the nomenclature of ice castles and porticos. To need no decoration. When he first told her a story she can't remember. Blank against blank, huge blankness of his hands. A story as skin. Boundary, temperature, delineation. What she was told and what she saw making fuzzy scratches in the dark. Coming to terms carefully over tea. If he saw her, he didn't see her. If he didn't see her, is perspective a concept worth inhabiting? The era of loose meditation gowns and full frontal nudity, a thin acrid smell underneath the baking bread, they grew it themselves in the basement. Lights buzzing all night long. Swimming as context, the house and its inhabitants, to get her head above water.
Mother in the cellar wakes from a dream. Along the northern coast, I saw the lowest tide, and everything exposed the sea had meant to keep inside. oyster shells, a missing brooch, Papa's sodden overcoat, anemones who don't know when to shut their traps, a lock of matted hair. Accusatory light was pointed at the scene. Deeper down, a sucking sound was all the sound that I perceived. Cover up and cover up and cover up, I cried. Pull the rumpled cloth across and let the hiding hide. Pull the rumpled cloth across and let what's lost be lost. I saw all this from 5 removes, through spectacles and willful mists, graphite, charcoal, paint. From on top the highest bluff through cedar breaks with cormorants and seabirds raiding seabirds' nests and falling eggs and fleeing deer. When I looked down, a beetle trundled at my feet, and others like him craned their necks to see.
To approach story, surround it with dolls and tuberculosis, give it playthings and drinks in the night, is also to see it recede in half-light. The story cannot be caught, cajoled, contained. We tell it in pieces falling out of the back of a truck or broken in branches on the ground. We make a nest or a bridge or a man, but all we tell is our mark along the folds. A story cannot be frayed, captured, endured. A story is not. She was too young to know that silence was due in part to the body and in part to the words. Hands shimmering, sound into distance. When the soldier sees the craggy woman standing next to the tree, bent, a rent in the fabric, pass by, stitch that door shut, her mother carrying laundry down the hall. When he speaks, she searches for a word, crevice, basket, bandage. The instant of distancing, her hand outstretched. She promises him all the gold he can swallow for one tender box. The moment he enters the tree is the moment the war is real, mud and bone, forsaking and forsaken. I never heard you. You never told me. Falling softly through the branches of a tree.
House bears the weight of a solitary woman on its wall. After Woman with Plants by Grant Wood. She is a woman waiting, and she has waited long and long in a still house unlicked by wind. She waits. A worn house dress hangs loosely on her limbs like another loose skin she's in. Her passive face is a wind-scoured plain. She waits to hear them at a wobbling table, cracked plate, egg-encrusted fork, the slim routine of eating alone. She clenches her broken cup, rises to refill it. Her wooden feet scoop the wooden floorboards like paddles, like oars. A weight of dust, cracker crumbs, cat hair flow behind. When she drops the cup, a couple drops of water fall to the floor and sink in. She is rooted there just long enough to feel the watered wood grain flow up. It flows up through her, and a greening begins. The hardened buds of her fingertips hum and leaf out. She grows taller. Now the house hangs from her arms in shards, like armor, like bark. She can walk in it. New shoots spool out through twisted windowsills, open doors, no ceiling, no floor. When she walks, a green wind stirs in her branches, breathes in her ear. It makes words, the ones she has waited to hear.
She sees herself on a wall, the photographer's wife watching her watch herself, 7 years old with clay in a dirty bathing suit, black smudge on her face and caught in the act of looking into the lens. Light gathers and concentrates. Far across the lake, the boys need rescue, and at the table she rubs her thumb across the clay. If in each story there is a moment where all stories converge, where the lines grow thick with possibility, moss upon branch. If for each character there is a moment when someone else is possible, sitting by a fire on the side of the road, heating water for tea and drying out its socks. This moment, unloosed from the knot, a single instant in time between she and is, between letters and silence. Aperture.
Cabinets. 1. My mother tells me we wear teetering cabinets on our heads, like hats, like high-rises, like hives, luminous compartments, the partitions of which can be breached at any time. She warns me that birds fly through, objects, words spill out from these cubicles, wreaking ruin and or unity as they fall. When mother and daughter stand face to face, a red tricycle rolls from one cubby hole to the next, or a fat blue teapot tips its contents into a recess further down, or stop it escapes from one compartment to the next. Hence the expression, an exchange took place, or these things are held in common until one of the two cabinets can no longer bear the weight and weakens. 2. If I had noticed your cabinet, I would have understood your reluctance to appreciate the mourning dove in any given spring. I would have observed the wrecked nests and abandoned eggs of your upper stories, would have approached you with greatest care, not to stir up the aviary that thrives in my branches and makes you uncomfortable in my presence. Seen from a distance, it can be said the same moon which rises in a mother's mind sets in a daughter's again and again until it can be said one takes after the other, absorbs into her own cabinet all objects surrendered by the older one by one, until it can be said it is time for new cabinets to materialize.
The man to remember may not exist in the same way she exists. It exists. Terrible brown hair and a cracked smile. They mean her to signify something. Turnstiles, brethren, ice. Problems of overlay, she on the world, on her body, on the world, looking in all their pockets. If she stands in the doorframe, what builds up behind arrives not as weight, but as color, saturation and masses of air. What it is to open the door, a when to arrive to. Looking wildly for a window as the silence mounts and finding the patient bird, beak curved like trouble. Dust storms moving through, nail yourself a boat. Story is the moment when the boat returns and just before the passengers spill onto the shore. The idea of being needed. What startled them in the dark was not the pulsing eyes, but the signs scratched on the walls. Arrows, assignation, misdirection. A gift just for her. He looked the wrong way, waiting for a bird to come in through the window.
Dove coats. I see the old house in my mind's eye, inverted as in the eye of a camera, distorted as in the mind of a daughter. The inner space defined by a lead-lined laundry chute, the exterior bird-riddled eaves. Morning doves have mites, Mother says. Don't put your hand in there. Last winter, the dovecotes were abandoned for good. When families flee, only feathers, droppings, eggshells remain. But now I hear the females cooing. They've come back for more. Plump hearts pumping, hoarse reassurances, maternal ditziness. Scrabbling sounds keep me awake with an eye to the hole through which a mother's beak protrudes. She is never without her offspring, save when they drop unnoticed to their deaths. Her eye is a black bead with a dark ring. I see myself reflected in reverse. Baby birds return to my distracted care, rise up from the floorboards, huddle beneath my nitwit wings.
When she was 7 and the geese reinvented their cage. When she was 7 and what was buried arrived later in the living room for tea. When she was 7 and mattresses and matches were both part of the story and part of the thing that never happened. Her grandfather's uncles turned in the light, examined, robed, sent geese to them, a rush of feathers and a whole world swirling. We are all just paddling in the dark, riding our slow donkeys, skirting the road, gathering greens for tea and food. One girl gathers another girl to her, pulls her up behind her on her pony, looks from right to left, and carefully disappears. Now that you're gone, mud and clay and dogging. A story as sound as uncles in the dark. Sheets wound round like cocoons, like dirges. Who touched whom, and under what circumstances? The glow of a cigarette, aunt, a pot, closed in on itself. If a story is circular, then it all comes back to them, dark hair and meaty breath and a shimmer along the edges. If a story is linear, then he could not have been there. Haze of flies and a little suture.